Today's content may be considered disturbing by some viewers, and as always, viewer discretion is advised. And if you have a story you want to send my way, just go to astheravendreams.com and click the button to do so. And thank you. Back in my 20s, I found a cheap place to live by browsing Craigslist. Yes, I know it was probably a stupid idea boarding with complete strangers, but back at the time, Craigslist wasn't as sketchy and there were no weird vibes coming off the other people that lived there, so I didn't see any problems with it. I found a place owned by an older couple. And they were sweet and explained that it was actually an old duplex that they turned into a house. And they said they weren't going to be getting the money back they put into it if they sold it, so they decided to rent it out, hoping to help others, as well as turn a profit. On the day of move-in, they were there to greet me, go over some more guidelines, and give me the key to my room. We all had keys to the actual house, and then our rooms locked so we could still have privacy, which I appreciated. They also introduced me to my new roommates. And there were two other girls, Erin and Abigail. Abigail, or Abby, as she told us to use, was actually our landlord's daughter. They were both nice girls and seemed like people that I would hang out with, so it seemed like it would work out. There was a fourth room that wasn't filled yet, but they were planning on having someone move in soon. It turned out to be a good time, though. We all got along fine. We seemed to share chores without even really asking or planning it out, which was awesome, too. Even when you would think the daughter would be spoiled or run amok, she wasn't. She was actually quite normal and respectful. Maybe normal wasn't the right word, though. For the longest time, she was fine. It was probably close to a year that things got weird. By this time, it was us three and another girl that moved in named Gabriella. Abby was going on some kind of mission trip. This is based on how she explained it. For about a month in another country that I now no longer remember. She had two birds, turtle doves, and she asked me to take care of them while she was gone. She left the key to her room with me, and told me some of the basic things, and I agreed to do it. When she came back from her trip, though, she seemed different. Her whole demeanor had changed. We would ask her how her trip was, and she explained some of the things that she did and learned, but then she would also just go on about some religious history lesson that no one asked for. I get it, and I have no problem with people that are religious, but when we're sitting watching a movie and she just speaks up and starts going on about how this guy tried to warn people in the village of the plague, but they didn't listen, and that's why we need to pay more attention, and then would just go back to watching TV. It was really weird, and we all saw it too when we were around. When Erin and I were home by ourselves, we brought it up and agreed that she was weird, but that we would let it go until it started interfering with one of us. Again, the landlords, her parents, seemed to be very nice people. But we didn't know how they would take us complaining about their daughter, so we just kept tallies on things that she did in case it got worse. Over time, she seemed to become more reclusive. She wouldn't eat anything that we made, saying our bodies are sacred, and that we needed to open our eyes to what we put into it. In fact, I don't think we ever saw her eat anymore after that. She rarely left the house, but when she did, it was very short. She always had sunglasses on and some kind of blanket or scarf covering her head. But, for the most part, she confined herself to her room. We would knock on her door to invite her to watch or play a game with us or go somewhere, but she would never open the door and the offers were always declined. Eventually, it just became a point that we would knock on the door to make sure that she was alive. Her parents would stop by at the beginning of the month to collect rent, and they would even ask us how she was doing. That was a surprise to me because I figured at least they would have had contact with her, but apparently not. So, we told them what we had been experiencing, and they said that they were seeing the same, except she wasn't even answering their calls anymore. They came in and tried knocking on Abby's door, and I think that she was expecting one of us and answered as she normally did, until her mother started talking, and her demeanor changed. Then, she started calling them by their names. She said something like, "I no longer need your help, Bonnie. Please, let me go." They looked upset and confused, but they left, saying to contact them if anything else happens. They thought it had something to do with the trip that she went on, but they weren't certain. They told us about some pamphlet that she got from a customer at her work, and that she decided to go to it, on their dime. She said that they would pay them back, of course, but never did, and then she was acting like this. It didn't take long for it to escalate, though. After a while, we could hear music coming from her room that consisted of very low drum beats and humming, all while she was singing nonsense above it. We never could make out the words, but it was like someone was trying to sing a song that they didn't know the words to. Then we could smell the incense. Then we could smell something worse than the incense. It was seeming like the incense were trying to cover up the smell of whatever else was in there. It smelled like rotting foods, which would make sense since she never came out. If she had plates and bowls or even trash in there that was festering, it was going to start smelling, especially since we were hitting the summer months. We actually had to buy some cheap plates because she seemed to come out at night when we were gone, or asleep, and then she would take them and never bring them back. The smell, though, it only got worse. You could smell it if you were at the door, but it started wafting out in the hall. Gabriella seemed to have taken all she could and then started beating on her door, telling her that she needed to do her part because she was making the place stink. But when she finally responded, she spouted something about needing to repent first, and then she could proceed with her human chores. So here's where it all came crashing down. One night, while I was sleeping, I could hear my name being whispered. I normally didn't lock my door while I was sleeping because I trusted the other girls, but I was still surprised when I opened my eyes to actually see someone in my room, standing by my door. It startled me, and I went to turn on my side lamp when she stopped me, saying not to. I knew at that point that it was Abby. She said that she had to go somewhere important, and I was the only one that she trusted. I still have no idea why. She told me not to let anyone in her room, not even Bonnie or Roger, which were her parents. I agreed, and asked her when she would be back, and she said that she didn't know. Then, she left my room, said some weird spiritual-sounding quotes, and left. I went back to sleep, though, and figured that I would handle it, if it was all real, in the morning. Sure enough, the next morning I got up and noticed that her keys and her little car were gone. I tried calling her cell phone, and it went straight to voicemail. But really, I don't even know if it had been like that for a while. It looked like Aaron had left already and Gabriella was taking a shower, so I just made breakfast and everything kept circling in my head. I thought I should at least tell her parents, right? So that they knew she wasn't home. But then I remembered her birds. Surely they were going to need to be fed, and I decided that I would use that as an excuse for going into her room. So I made my way to her room. The smell had weakened again, so you could only smell it at her door, thankfully. I turned the knob, and surprisingly it wasn't locked. But I wish that I had not opened it now. It was horrible. The smell hit me first. I was surprised how much that door was holding back. It smelled just like decay. The windows were covered with her blankets and sheets. She had a little twin or full-sized bed, and she had it leaning against the wall. The mattress seemed to be cut down the center, and things were being stored in it. I didn't get close enough to see what exactly. The floor was scribbled on with all kinds of incoherent writing and drawings, and then there was her dresser, placed against the left wall. The top of it just had heads, like her birds' heads, and other small animal heads. Some of them were just skulls, and some still had skin attached to them, all with their eyes sewn shut. I think at that point I found what the smell was coming from, and I ran out of the room, leaving the door open. I screamed for Gabriella, and she came into the kitchen, and I explained to her what had happened. She immediately went back and looked. She also shouted some things out, and we agreed to call Bonnie first. We explained what we had seen, and they were over there pretty quick. They seemed just as horrified as us. I'm not sure what all happened. They probably wanted to keep it somewhat private, but some people showed up, and they all took pictures of the room, and I think it was a friend of Roger and himself that went into the room to completely clean it out. Gabriella had already left, not wanting to deal with it, and they asked me to leave for a bit to finish, and I agreed. When I returned, Roger and Bonnie were still there, and as I walked back to my room, her door was open, and I noticed that her room was almost completely empty. They then told me that when she got home, they were going to move her back in with them until she was, quote, better. She didn't come home that night, though, and it was actually a few days before she did. Apparently, she didn't like the idea of her room being emptied, and she let out a blood-curdling scream, waking all of us up. I ran out of my room, which was across from hers, and she immediately turned around and started screaming about how she trusted me and that I would pay with my soul. Gabriella and Abby were now in the hall telling her that she was disgusting and creepy, and I was just trying to apologize and tell her that she needed help. But one of the last things that she said to me was that, again, I would pay with my soul and that she would curse me until I died, and then kind of mumbled something under her breath before running down the hall and out the door. None of us were willing to go back to sleep, so we left a message with the owners and just sat around waiting to see if she would come back. Weeks turned to months, and she never came back. Her parents never even saw or heard from her. Every few weeks, I would receive a package that had to be delivered since there was no postage, but it was addressed to me. Each time, it had some creepy stuff in it. The head of an animal, similar to what was in her room. There were weird, cryptic, if not threatening messages and images, and each time, I would just walk it out to the dumpster. Gabriella moved out, not feeling safe, and Erin moved after the end of her lease that she agreed on. I was fine with staying there, but once the packages started coming, I started getting the sense that I was being watched. Everywhere. While I was there, when I was at the store, driving to work, just all the time. I felt like I was becoming paranoid with this overwhelming sense of dread, or like someone was going to kill me. So, I eventually moved out too. I kept in touch with Erin and Gabriella, though, and they never mentioned anything, so I guess I was just the lucky winner. Like I mentioned, this was several years ago. And I check the news, and Facebook, Twitter, all of that, and I don't think that she's ever returned. It's really amazing. Not in a good way, and terrifying as to what may have happened to her, but I guess she just doesn't want to be found. However, I would like it if this feeling of being watched would just go away. I had this story written out for quite some time now, but I was hesitant to share it just because. I'm sure it can lead to bad memories for some. But after getting permission from those involved, I decided it would be a good idea, if not just as another way of telling those that you can get away from a toxic relationship as well. So, this is a quick warning to my story. After college, I moved back to my home state and into a house with an old friend of mine, Alma. She lived in a house that was owned by her parents, and she just paid them rent. However, it was a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, so she figured why not have a few friends that she trusted move in, that way it makes the rent even less. So, I made the long drive back home, and Alma greeted me and helped me bring in the few belongings that I had. After talking for some time, our other roommate showed up, and Alma introduced us. Her name was Yesenia, and they met at a local community college that they went to. She was a very sweet girl. She was always very polite and considerate of us when it came to anything she did around the house. She was fun to hang out with around the house, or to just talk to. And she quickly opened up to me as well. Another thing that I learned about her was that she had horrible taste in men, which also ties into me meeting her boyfriend. Let's call him Rick. You could tell that he thought very highly of himself. He was self-absorbed and very inconsiderate. That alone was infuriating, but the outward aggression to Yesenia and sometimes us was unbelievable. When they were playing around and he was fed up, he would smack her arm or shove her back and raise his voice at her. Not that it's any better doing it in private, but it was just awkward seeing it happen in front of us. Because of all of his antics, Alma said that he wasn't allowed over there anymore. Yesenia seemed indifferent about it, though. Like she knew what was going on wasn't right, but she accepted the outcome. Hell, we even tried convincing her that she should probably just leave him, because if it hadn't already, it was bound to get worse. But, as they always do, she claimed that she would be okay, so we just moved on from there. It wasn't until a couple months after this, so maybe about 8 months since I moved in, I believe, that this all happened. Yesenia had started staying at Rick's place more and more. It was just on the weekends, but it became more and more frequent. Until one time, she texted Alma stating that she was going over there, and when she would be back, and then we didn't see her for a week. No calls or texts, nothing. We were rightfully worried. I even dropped by her work and asked for her. She worked at a salon and they knew me and Alma, so they told me that she didn't finish all of her appointments a couple of days prior and had called in the last 2 days. Unfortunately, we didn't have the slightest idea where Rick lived, other than it was an apartment. And since her coworkers confirmed that it was her that called in, the police couldn't file a missing persons either, so all we could do was wait around. Finally, she came home one night, while we were both watching a movie in the living room. I think that she was hoping we would be in bed by then, as we startled each other when she entered. She started piecing things together pretty quickly the more that we stood there talking and asking questions. She had a pretty poor makeup job on her chin and her cheek, where she was trying to cover up bruises. We begged her to cut it off with him before things got worse, and she said that she would. She just had to get him to calm down, as well as the swelling, before he would let her go. We tried to keep her occupied as much as possible, and we even took her to work, hoping that he wouldn't show up if her car wasn't there. I thought that we did a pretty good job, too. At the time. It wasn't too long after she returned, though, maybe a bit longer than a week. The bruising was pretty much gone, and she even seemed to be acting like herself again. I was off this day and offered to take her to work, and she declined, saying that she was going to drive herself. She said she was going straight to work and then back home with no other plans, and, knowing her schedule, I thought it would be fine, so I agreed. I was wanting to make something specific for dinner that night, so after going to the store that day, I went home and started prepping. And that's when I realized I had forgotten something that I needed, or was low on said item. I didn't want to go back to the store, so I texted Alma asking her to get it on her way home. A few hours later, Yesenia actually texted me saying that she was going to stop by the store and wanted to let me know. I thought this was perfect, and I asked her to get me what I needed instead, and then told Alma never mind. While I was making dinner, though, I noticed it had been about 2 hours since Yesenia got off work, and thought that she definitely should have been home by this point. She didn't work more than about 20 minutes from our place, and the store probably would have only added about an hour, and that was being generous. So I called her to see if she was okay. She didn't answer, and in fact, it kind of seemed like my call was ignored. So I tried calling again, and it went straight to voicemail. I started to become worried, so I called Alma to have her try too, and she had the same results. She agreed to swing by her work in the store to see if she could see her car, and I started putting stuff away so I could help. And we had also talked Yesenia into giving us his address as well, in case anything ever happened again. So, my plan was to drive by there to see if I could find her too. We had a feeling that she was still talking to him, but she was an adult, so we could only say, or suggest, or do so much. She had to make her own choices, but I was praying that she at least wasn't still seeing him or trying to work it out with him. I went to my room to grab my purse, and as I was leaving, I heard the door open and slam shut, as well as heavy breathing. From the front door, you enter the living room, and to the right is the kitchen. Straight back from the kitchen was the hall that led to Yesenia's room and a bathroom, and the hall to the left of the kitchen led to mine and Alma's room, with our shared bathroom. As I started walking towards the living room, I called out, hoping that it was Yesenia, when she came running around the wall, visibly shaken. I tried to ask her what was wrong, but it took everything I could to snap her back. She'd been crying, her hair was a mess, and she looked genuinely terrified. She told me it was Rick, that he was trying to get her to get into his car, and that he had a gun. Sure, I was scared, but I tried to calm her and say that she was safe. But then she mentioned that he followed her. It didn't take long for me to piece it together. So, I told her to go hide in my room, thinking that he wouldn't think to check there, hopefully, and immediately went to make sure the door was locked and to grab my phone from the charger in the living room. To my relief, Yesenia had locked the door, but as I looked through the blinds, I saw Rick walking up. I didn't know what to do, so I tried playing it off when he started banging on it. I tapped on the window when he noticed me, and I yelled at the door that he wasn't supposed to be there. It became a short argument at that point, him asking for Yesenia, and I told him she wasn't there. He tried to call my bluff because her car was out front, but I tried convincing him that she probably parked it there to throw him off, and that she may have gone to the gas station down the street. And that's when I noticed that he just got quiet, but he hadn't left. I quickly learned what his next plan was when he started throwing himself at the door. I grabbed my phone and I called 911 and ran to my room. I saw Yesenia peeking her head out from my closet, and I told her to stay hidden. As I started explaining to the operator what was happening, I heard a loud crash, and then I could hear him yelling for her. I heard him throwing and smashing things, and then he got close to my room. Our rooms don't have locks, so all I could do was stand there frozen as to what he could do. He stood in my doorway with his weapon of choice in hand and demanded that I tell him where she was. Again, I tried telling him that she wasn't there, and he threatened to come back for me if I was lying. I thought I was going to die, or at least get sick right there. It seemed like it lasted forever, and in the back of my mind, I was angry that no one had shown up yet for help at this point. But as he grabbed my wrist, again demanding me to go with him to find her, I started pulling back when I could hear the sirens getting louder. It didn't take him long to process what was happening, as he let go of me, running off and leaving me to fall to the floor. I got up, and I checked to see where he went, but our place was empty. Then, I heard a cop call out from the door. Yesenia and I immediately ran out and started explaining what had happened. Apparently, she was using the store as an excuse to see him. She said that she wanted to meet in public and only talk briefly. However, he had other ideas and tried dragging her back to his car, but she had managed to escape and drive back here. Then, I told him what happened at our place, and I gave him his description. That part was more for confirmation, as they saw a guy running from our backyard, and they said that he had thrown something over a fence, so they stopped him. So, thankfully, he wasn't out for long. I know we probably shouldn't have pushed her so hard, but we did convince her to press charges. So, between what he did to me and her, and the damage to Alma's house, he went away for a long time. Yesenia went to stay with her mom for a while, but still came over a lot to hang out with us, as we continued to live together for several years. As bad as it was, I definitely think we all became closer, and have this cool sister bond now. All jokes aside though, I know that those situations are never easy, but just watch for those warning signs, and ask for help if you ever need it. And as for Rick, I hope you never meet anyone outside of that cell ever again. I have a story from when I went to college back in the mid-90s. What happened didn't actually happen to me, but to the person that was my roommate at the dorm, and it's the reason that she actually moved onto campus and started living in the dorms. Obviously, I'm not giving out the name of the school or my city. I'll just say that we live in the southwestern section of the US, and leave it there. I lived on campus for the most of my time in classes, but the school had it set up to where you didn't have to live on campus at all. And a lot of people took advantage of that, living with family, each other, etc. My friend, and eventually roommate, and the person this story is about, was a short gal named Stacy. Stacy's one of those girls that just never really grew taller than she was in middle school, and she had a very small frame at the time, so she was often taken for being weak, or thought to be a teenager pretending to be an adult. That said, when I got to know Stacy, I learned that she was a bit of a firecracker, and she had taken a number of self-defense courses, so she knows how to properly defend herself if she ever needs to. After a while of living with me at the dorm, she told me about her previous roommate, and what happened to get her to move on to campus. Whenever she was starting her first semester, she didn't want to live on campus because of the additional costs to the tuition, so she went pretty heavy into the wanted ads. This was the mid-90s, like 96 if I remember correctly, so the internet wasn't really an option. She said that she met with a handful of people in the weeks leading up to her first week, and she was getting worried because none of the places that she looked at seemed to be worth paying for. She said that she was then complaining about it to her mother over dinner, and her mom made a comment about having a coworker who had a son that went to the same school. She mentioned that she was pretty sure he had his own place, and that the coworker was just funding it for him, and she said that she would talk to her to get more information about him so they could see if it was an option. She was a bit desperate, so even though she had never met the guy, she was willing to at least consider it as a possibility. She ended up meeting with the son, who we're going to call AJ, and he seemed like he was an okay guy. Plus, he lived in a 2-bedroom unit, and he didn't have a use for the second bedroom beyond storing his extra stuff. They had pretty much agreed that she would take the spare room, as long as she furnished it, and his parents would just keep paying the rent as long as she pitched in for food. Basically, she had gotten in on a pretty sweet deal that seemed like it was going to work great. She said that the whole thing was fine at first, and that the guy would basically just keep to himself with little interaction. She was working part-time, and was attending classes full-time, so they didn't really interact much. For the first month, nothing really happened. AJ was friendly when they saw each other, but about a month in, he seemed like he was trying to be a bit more forward with the conversations. It wasn't too creepy, but he was very intent on getting to know her better, asking if she had a boyfriend, asking her about what she was studying, what she wanted to do with her life, etc. She thought that he was just trying to get to know her better and trying to be friends, which wasn't a huge deal. But he kept asking things which, to her, was feeling a bit intrusive. She attempted to set some boundaries with him, basically saying that she appreciated him trying to get to know her, but that she did kind of prefer that he not pry so much into her personal life. Having known Stacy as long as I have now, I can say that she can be a bit direct at times. She's very to the point with how and what she says, but not necessarily rude, just very straightforward in her presentation. She said that AJ seemed to understand what she was saying, and it was a respectful conversation, but that it only got worse from there. For a few days, AJ seemed to be a bit upset with her, but then he went back to just being himself, including going back to asking the personal questions. At this point, Stacy started to just give short or incorrect answers because it was obvious he wasn't going to quit. It was annoying, but she said it wasn't enough for her to give up her living arrangement. That is, until about a week or so later. During one of the days where Stacy was off work and didn't have class, AJ was out of the apartment doing something else during the day. And Stacy had decided to do some of the cleaning around the apartment and started putting stuff away. She grabbed his backpack and went to put it in his room so it was out of the way and off the floor. She opened his door and she went to put it on his bed, and when she glanced over and noticed there was a pair of underwear sitting on his nightstand. She said that, at first, she thought that it may have been his girlfriend's or something. Until, after a few moments, it clicked and she realized that it was actually a pair of her underwear. Obviously, she was a bit grossed out about this situation. It wasn't in a place where it could have accidentally come in with the laundry or something like that. It was on the nightstand next to his bed. At this point, she was pretty fed up with everything. Him being nosy about stuff, being inappropriate, and now this, it was enough to get her to decide to finally find a new place to live. It didn't quite end there, though. When AJ got home, Stacy said that she confronted him about the underwear that she found in his room, and the entire thing unfurled into something insane. She said that he told her he took it because he needed to know what size she was, and that he had more of her clothing in his room for that exact reason. He said that he was going to give them back here soon, but that he had a surprise for her, which was the reason he needed to know her sizes. He walked back into his room, and when he came back out, he was holding what looked like a wedding dress. And then he got on his knees and asked Stacy if she would, in his words, honor him by becoming the woman he would spend the rest of his life with. Obviously, she said no, and immediately started looking into getting a new place to live. She said that she no longer felt comfortable being anywhere near him, and that for a couple of weeks that she lived there after that, she would sleep with her door blocked by her end table just in case. Apparently, after this event, he actually stopped speaking to her altogether, and was pretty much never home. She packed her stuff up and got a hold of the campus to move into the dorms, and then became my roommate. She was shocked that he was that level of obsessed with her, to the point that he went and bought a dress for her after stealing her clothes. And while some people may hear this and think, well, that's not that creepy, in my opinion, I completely agree with Stacy. This was creepy as hell. If he was just into her and took it slow, it would be one thing, and he would have then found out that Stacy wasn't exactly straight. Instead, he went the route of being weird and obsessive, taking her clothes to get her size, and then spending money on a custom wedding dress to propose to someone that he'd only known for about 2 months. Obviously, not the best way to go about it. Stacy got out of there as quickly as she could, and she never spoke to him again after that. Hello there, people. Welcome to the end of the video. And that's right. We're now at the end of the video. Wow. Yeah, anyways, this was a collection of roommate horror stories, the other topic that won the poll last month. I know there was no poll for July, and I have reasons for that. I'm doing things a little different, but we'll probably have another poll in July to kind of get you guys to make a decision. I don't know. Anyways, hopefully you guys enjoyed this video, this collection of stories. If you did, please do hit that thumbs up button and subscribe if you are new to the channel. And if you really feel ever so bold, go down below. Go to the comment section. Leave me a comment. Tell me what your favorite bird is. And don't feel obligated to say ravens because of me. Don't feel obligated. Say whatever you feel like saying. Like, for instance, my favorite birds are both, I actually have two, Carolina wrens, because they always look angry, and chickadees. I love chickadees, because they go chickadee-dee-dee-dee. And then they sing, they go dee-doo, and then go chickadee-dee-dee whenever they get angry. So they're fun little, aggressive, tiny birds. Little puffballs of anger. So those are my two favorites. What is your favorite bird? Consider telling me down below. And of course, you can also let me know how you're doing, what you thought of the video, thoughts on the stories, all that stuff. Anyways, I'll see you all in the next video. But of course, until then, my friends,